Hey everybody, On the Run with Beards and Dunn is back for another episode, and again we have a guest, and a guest I'm super excited about. I have never met Keith Brantly, but I've read about him for years and years and years and years. You know, Keith's career kind of came after him. I kind of was out of the running scene in about 84, 85, you know, really taking it seriously. And I know Dick, because of injury, was kind of, I hate to say it, Dick, but your career was kind of on the downside. You came back and made the Olympic trials in 88, which was commendable after having that Achilles tendon surgery and all that. But Keith Brantly's career about that same time was just really kind of taking off like a rocket. And so, and you know, when we look at getting a guest on, usually, Keith, it's somebody Dick knows or coaches that we've had in the past, acquaintances, what have you. And the story I remember, Dick, the first time I heard your name, Dick had came back from a race and we were chit-chatting and he goes, I met this young kid. When you're our age, everybody's a young kid. We were probably in our mid-20s. You were probably right out of college, I think. And he said, this kid is so enthusiastic about running and he just wants to be a professional runner so bad. And I remember Keith Brantly, and that name stuck in my head. And, you know, and to get Dick's attention, Dick's Mr. Enthusiasm to begin with. So to get somebody that could match Dick's enthusiasm, and so
that's Keith.
That's Keith. And so, you know, I'm going to do a little brief intro just for any of our viewers who, you know, are a lot of the younger viewers. Keith, I hate to break this to you. You know, I'm helping with some college kids. They weren't even born in the year 2000. You know, they're 19 years old. They were born in like 2005 and 6. So when I bring up the name Dick Beardsley, Frank Shorter, Bill Rogers, Keith Brantley, they get this deer in the headlight. It's like
true.
They what? And then some of them will go, I think I've heard that name, and they're not even sure why. But you know, briefly, you know, a 5-time Olympic trials qualifier, which I know Dick, you and I made it twice, and you know, I think 3 was a lot of guys maybe made it 3, but 5 times.
I know.
That's longevity there. Made the United States Olympic team in 1996 in the marathon. We're going to hear about that, I sure hope. Also ran in the 5 and 10K at Olympic trials. 12-time member of a U.S. team. How many U.S. uniform warm-up suits do you have hanging? Well, 12.
I don't know. I don't know. I think they seem to disappear. I mean, I had college roommates. My roommate Mark Sheehan used to call it glomming. Glomming is another term for I'm just taking it.
Well, I thought you must have 12 of them. I was going to try to bum one off you here because that was always a dream to represent our country. You know, Dick got to go overseas and represent.
But I never got to wear the USA uniform. Injuries cut me short of that possibility. And that was one thing, no regrets, but the one thing I would have just loved to been able to wear that USA across my chest. And you got to do that many, many times, Keith. And that in itself has just got to be a thrill representing our country.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely.
This one blows me away. You're an 8-time road racing champion at either 10K, 20K, 25K, or the marathon. 8 times you were the U.S. champ at those distances. I'd take 1 time would be a career. You know, personal best of 2:12 in the marathon, 1:01 of change in the half. I think your 15K, 42:50. That one really stood out for me. 10K, 28:02, 5K, 13:36, 1,500 meters, 3:40. And people don't know that. That's about a 3:58 mile. So you have a range. You kind of remind me a little bit of Greg Meyer. From the sub-4-minute miler all the way through to the marathon. And you were on the cusp, too. You got to catch the wave of professional running.
I did.
And I know I read a statistic here where it said you made over $400,000 in prize money. And that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
Well, 100 of that was in one race. Okay, so
the Olympic trials or whatever. But you know, then there's we could maybe you and Dick can talk. I don't think it's a big thing anymore. There was under the table money that was, and it was no big secret. And I think that it was AAU in my day. Then it became the TAC, and I'm not even sure what it is today. I think a lot of them, they kind of turned the blind eye because they realized you guys were trying to survive.
Well, Edwin Moses called us all enlightened amateurs.
Enlightened. That's a good way of putting it. And so Keith, this is your resume, and you were a high school state champion in cross country.
I want to
and
talk about that a little bit.
Yeah,
Mike,
and so in Florida, but Dick, what I've taken up off of this introduction because I think you probably know Keith a little better than I do.
Well, Keith, again, thank you for being on our show, and yeah, I remember. My memory's not as good as it used to be, but I remember back then meeting you, and I'm pretty sure it was at the River Run there in Jacksonville in maybe 1980 or 81 or something like that, and yeah, I just remember meeting this enthusiastic young man and just fired up and a heck of a runner. And I'm thinking to myself, this young man's going to go someplace. And so, Keith, you grew up in Florida, and tell us about how you got into running and then how it evolved into how good of a runner you became.
Yeah. Well, thanks. And guys, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. And just wonderful that you do this for the running community and give old guys like me a forum to say hello again to everybody. But yeah, but Dick, my running career actually started by accident. I literally, when I was 11, I fell off the front of a motorboat. In Florida, we have a lot of lakes, everybody water skis and things like that. And, when you're 11, you don't really understand physics very well. And we were teaching a friend of ours, a neighbor, how to slalom ski. And how you do that water skiing is you drop a ski, you get up on two skis and you drop one and you're on one ski, you hope.
Yeah.
And we had circled around and some reason we were about to run over the ski that this other skier had just dropped. So not just reacting, I tried to swat it out of the way. But when you're going 25 miles an hour in a boat,
right?
Yeah. So I got bounced off the bow of the boat. The boat went over my head, but I remember what my dad said: if you ever fall off off of a boat, dive straight down as quickly as you can. Yeah. Unfortunately, didn't make it. The prop sliced through my foot, and basically the only thing holding. Yeah. You and I have farm accidents. I have boat accidents.
Right.
But the prop basically cut my foot almost in half. The only thing holding my Achilles on my heel on was my Achilles. Long story short, during my rehab and everything, it was a very long time. And my neighbor, actually, back then, radiologists and orthopedic surgeons worked closely together. My radiologist, the guy who helped take care of it, was a neighbor, and he actually was training for the 1976-75 Boston Marathon.
Oh, okay.
And my foot had healed up pretty well by then. And I had three older brothers, and being the youngest in the family, for some reason they said I was pretty annoying. I don't believe them. But I just remember running from one of them and then looking at Dr. Spanders running by our house. And I'm thinking, that's an adult who could save my life. And so I ran out in the road and he says, "Hey, looks like your foot's healed up pretty well. You want to run to the end of the road and back?" And the end of our road was about a mile down and a mile back. So as bad as I was in math, I could figure out it was 2 miles. And I figured my brother would probably forget about what he was mad about. By the time I got back, he said, "Hey, why don't you come to a little road race with us next weekend?" I said, "Sure. How far is it?" 5 miles. I'm like, "All right, whatever." And that's how it started. I actually, I think I was 13 or so, and just started running with a neighbor. And, it was just from there that I kind of picked it up.
And then in high school, so you ran in high school, and then what did you run for distance-wise in high school, Keith?
Yeah. I was kind of utility, ran everything 800, the mile, the 2 mile, or the 880 back then. I wasn't great. I mean, in cross country, I ran a 3 mile. I won my state meet my senior year. I ran 14:16 for 3 miles. Now you got to remember, this is Florida. Okay. It was flat. I mean, it was on an airport, right? Yeah. Like I had on near a runway of an airport. So, it was flat. But I ran like a 4:16 mile. I was in maybe a 9:7, 9:8, 2 miler. Nothing fantastic, but I mean, I wasn't, it was good enough to get a scholarship to the University of Florida, at least a partial scholarship, and that's where I wanted to go.
Yeah, so you go there, tell us about your college experience and how that went in NCAAs and everything.
Yeah, well, I mean, my running was I enjoyed. Never won an NCAA championship. I think the highest I ever finished was maybe fifth in the 10,000 in 1983. I think Ed, I think won, or Gerard Darnikowski won, and I think Ed was maybe second.
Okay.
Ed Eiston.
I again, not a superstar at the NCAA level, and I wasn't a great student either. I mean, my 4-year bachelor degree was the best 6.5 years of my life.
That's I went to a 2-year college. It took me 4 years to graduate. So.
You know what? I mean, if you've ever been to the University of Florida, why would you ever leave?
Oh my gosh. So you get done with your college career, then you have to make a decision, I would imagine. Am I going to get a job, or am I going to pursue my running and go from there?
Well, yeah, great point. Again, I finished my eligibility long before I finished my degree, and I got invited to come out and run for Nike out in Eugene, Oregon. I went out and visited. I wasn't going to run for Athletics West. I wasn't good enough to make that team, but they were looking at me for Four Corners Track Club, which was the team that had a lot of the foreign athletes on there. And I guess if you're from Florida, you're pretty foreign anyway, but Eugene just wasn't a great fit for me. So I stayed in Gainesville. And it was the best thing I ever did. Nike did give me a 1-year contract. It was signed by Jeff Hollister, if you remember that
Jeff.
name.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And it was $500 a month. It was a $3,000 travel stipend and all the shoes I needed, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven.
Oh boy!
I'm like,
I hear you.
And it was great, and it gave me the opportunity really to like many athletes, really to be kind of autonomous, where you can kind of choose where you want to race. You don't have to race every road race out there to make a little bit of money and things like that. And so I did a hybrid. I actually was cross country, track, and roads, and jack of all trades, master of nothing. And I kind of enjoyed it. I got to race a lot. I love racing.
Me too.
Yeah. I mean, your body doesn't know the difference between a race and a hard workout. It could care less, right?
No, and and Keith, back in Mike and down in my times, back then I raced partner every weekend. It was most of them I didn't taper for them. It was just part of my workout for the week.
And run.
Yeah, and you get into a race. And there's something about when you pin that number on, you can run faster than you might do a workout in, but it doesn't seem as hard just because you're out there, going against other people.
And the beer's free.
Right, exactly.
Did I read you won your first marathon? Was it Honolulu? I think I read somewhere.
No, gosh, no. I wish. That was my first marathon. I think Ibrahim Hussein won it, or Gideon Shahanga. I can't remember which one, but I do remember talking, this goes back, to right when I got out of college. I started working with David Martin. I had talked David, that was 1989, I think it was. And I was hot that year. I think I'd run 42:50 for 10K. I think I had run 28:02 for 15K, 28:02 for 10K. So by the end of that year, I was feeling pretty confident that I could run a pretty good marathon. But the problem is you actually have to run more than like 16 miles to run a good marathon. I'm not really good with math, so that conclusion came at about the 18th mile of Honolulu after I had gone out in 1:05 for the first half. And if you know anything about Honolulu, it just is a brutal course. Yeah. And I think it was about 22 miles. I think it was Johnny Poley who won the New York City Marathon about a month before that. Comes cruising by me, and he's going like, "Hey," and I kind of looked at him, "Hey, Ferrari brother," and he kind of looks at me and just kind of keeps on going. And after the race, I went up to him. I said, "Hey man, why didn't you kind of like help me out? You knew I was struggling." He says, "I did not want to catch what you had, and because you look terrible." I said, "Well, thank you." And then I finished the race. I think it's funny because I think Frank Shorter had said to me before the race, he says, if you want to pace yourself well before this race, or during this race, start out, go by that first mile, look at the trees that you're passing by, look at the signposts, and get an idea of how fast you're running, and then slow down. And because imagine yourself finishing the race that fast, then slow down because you'll never finish that fast. And he was absolutely right. I mean, it is absolutely right. I went out too fast and died like a dog. But I do remember finishing the race and being thrown into the medical tent because I was way overheated and really struggling.
Yeah.
And, the doctor was like, yeah, we got to get you in an ice bath, but first we got to do, you got to take your temperature and stuff like that. I said, okay. So I opened my mouth. He says, oh, no, we go the other end. And he pulls out this rectal thermometer, looked like a telephone pole. I said, I'm better. I'm okay. I'm all fine.
Yeah, that'll cure anything, won't it? I got to bet. Keith, so what did you end up running that day time-wise?
All right. Well, yeah. And it's funny because I was kind of in the Mark Nenow, camp that if you're a national class or world class runner and you can't break 2:20 in the marathon, you've got to give it up. Until I became one. I ran 2:20:33.
Oh, so close.
Oh, it was. Listen, it might as well have been 4 hours and 20 minutes. It didn't make any difference. It was horrible. It was the most horrible experience. I said to Dave Martin, I said, why do people run this stupid thing? It's the dumbest distance.
I think we all said that. No, Keith, I want to back up just a little bit because you mentioned Dave Martin twice, and I got to know Dave real well. I was one of the original people on this Olympic development program,
the Elite Athlete Project. Yeah,
yeah, and so I got to go down to
Atlanta and get tortured.
Yeah,
and went to Georgia State and got tortured.
Yeah, Georgia State, and I remember getting on that gosh dang treadmill with that mask on, and then he had some grad students there to cheer you on, and he just kept cranking up that.
You got cheered on? I had bullwhips.
No bullwhips for me. They probably figured they needed them, maybe because we weren't getting the most out of us back then. But what an incredible man he was, and the knowledge he had, and he became your coach then, didn't he?
He did. I mean, it took some convincing. He wanted to really stay very neutral with all the athletes. He didn't want to be seen as someone whose favorite, one was a favorite of another. And he had some great he had, he had Bruce Bickford. He worked with Sebastian Coe. I mean, so I could understand he didn't want to do that, but I don't know how I convinced him. I just said, listen, I have no marketable skills. Okay. I've got, a degree in health science. I said, running is my only thing. Okay. I said, I need your help. And I guess I guilted him to it. So,
and then, he had that raspy voice, and then the Volkswagen van and then Dave passed away way too young. What did he have? Was it Parkinson's?
Yeah, he had Parkinson's, and he had Parkinson's for a very, very long time, Dick. I don't think a lot of people know that, but I began to notice probably about 5 years into our relationship, and this was probably, I want to say, oh gosh, it was probably 1986, 87. I began to notice, some of the signs of Parkinson's, but he was, you would have never known it, with him.
No, and so knowledgeable. And I remember the first time he put me on the treadmill, it was going to be that afternoon. And so that morning I went out for a workout. Well, that's the last time I ever did a workout before I had to get on that gosh dang treadmill. As you know, Keith, they run you to where you're going to go off the back end, And
Well, and his protocol is actually tougher than most. I mean, he actually starts you out a little slower, but you end up going on the treadmill much longer than most of the protocols. So, but I mean, it was a fascinating time because we did basically the same things all the time. He had the same skinfold calipers. He used the same. He'd pull them out of the velvet box and go like that, and he's like and he had a lot of other equipment that was probably more accurate, but he said, I'm only interested in the deviations, not so
Right.
much, the total amount and stuff. So, and for me, it was really good because he also had a very strong background. Gosh, at one time there wasn't a respiratory therapist that practiced in Atlanta that hadn't taken a course from Dave Martin.
Right.
I mean, yeah, he was. But I grew up with asthma, exercise-induced asthma, and allergy-induced asthma is really, really bad. My parents smoked, in a closed house, and my oldest brother was a chief of pulmonology at UF Health because he had such bad, lung disease and stuff.
Wow.
So Dave was very fascinated by that, and we did a lot of experiments, on using some medication and then doing a test and then not doing it and things like that. And it's amazing the things that we pulled together and the information we pulled together.
Yeah, I bet. So now, okay, you run 220 and change at Honolulu. It was a tough race, the last part. So when you got done, were you thinking, okay, I ain't doing this no more? And then maybe after a couple of weeks you recover, you're thinking, well, maybe I can do this again. So, what was your thoughts right after that race?
Yeah. I mean, the marathon is like a spouse that just keeps pushing you away, and you keep coming back. It's funny because I don't think that the marathons definitely was not my gig, and probably anything above 10K was not my gig. I should have stayed in the mile. It's just I love the parties after road races, after 10Ks, and I mean, my God, yeah, and I just kind of matriculated to road racing and longer races and things. I think, for me, the marathon was something that I could never kind of get the grasp on, partly because I never, I always felt like I could conquer it by leading it or by, controlling it. And
Yeah.
the marathon is, I think Bob Costa said it perfectly about race walking. He says, race walking, the people who do best in race walking are the ones who can whisper the loudest. And that's kind of like the marathon. I mean, the people that do really well, at least back in our day, now it's it's a drag race. It's a gun goes off and it's you're running 420, 425. For me it was something where it didn't lend to my personality very well. I eventually did well, but only I think just despite myself.
But Keith, talking about doing well, so in 1996 you run the Olympic trials. And our very own Bob Kempinen from Minnesotan, you got in a battle with him, and I forget who the third person was, but
it was Mark Coogan.
Mark Coogan. And tell us a little bit about that race and how it developed, and what your thoughts were those last few miles. Thinking, man, I might make the Olympic team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think you have to go back a little further in that. Really, my history of catastrophic failures of thought and of performance at the trials is just indelibly burned. So 84, I didn't even make it out of the heats in the 10,000. In 88, I should have made the team in the 10,000 in 88, and I failed miserably. It was a hot night. I should have done really well. I think it was ninth. And just by luck, I signed up for the 5,000, and I made it to the heats and the semifinals, and I'm in the final of the 5,000. And I missed the team, or missed third by 1.87 seconds.
Oh.
So I was fourth there. But then in 92, I thought, okay, we'll move to the marathon. I'm ready to go. And this is where that impetuousness kind of drops in, right? At 13 miles, I'm looking around and I'm like, I feel great. I feel awesome. But then there's 25 other guys that feel the same. They're just not idiots, right?
Right.
And so I'm looking over at Ken Martin, who I'm thinking he's going to blow this race open at any point. And I'm thinking, I think I can pull this off. So I start picking it up. And before you know it, I'm clear. I'm like, at 18 miles, you couldn't have told me I wasn't going to win that race. I look back and I'm like, where is everybody?
Wow.
And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I got this. And then right at about 21 miles, it's like, Kempinen goes by me, Steve Spence goes by me, Ed goes by me, and I'm stuck again in fourth.
Oh,
And so I will say that it wasn't so much 96 wasn't so much um, a better performance. It was a better strategy and sticking to the strategy.
okay.
I stuck to what Dave had told me to do. He says, you know, go out in the first 10 miles. I don't want you to even be near the lead. Just stay warm. It was really cold that day for us. And for me, being from Florida, it's 28 degrees.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I just kind of stood back. And even when Paul Zimmerman took off, I think he was leading. He led through. He pulled a Brantly. He led through like 16 miles easily, and we swallowed him up. And then that's when the race started. And I will tell you, Kempton had put some moves in that I have never seen. I mean, he was throwing in 442 miles up hills,
Dang.
and Charlotte's course was brutal.
Yes.
It was brutal. But then right at about, it was, I think right around 21 miles, we had an aid station, and I think I had number one, and I think Bob was number three, his number. So we were on the same table because they had even odd tables, right? And I remember he goes to reach for his bottle, and he started to miss it, and he did a pirouette, and we're going 5 minutes a mile, right?
Right.
And he turns around and looks at me right in the face.
Oh,
And I'm going, oh God, I'm
head-on
done.
collision.
I'm thinking to myself, if Tinkerbell can do a little pirouette
Right.
at 21 miles of a marathon, he's feeling pretty darn good. But I'm thinking I still got a chance here. And then right at about, I want to say 22 miles, I look up ahead and he put in a big surge. Coogan kind of went with him. I kind of stayed back a little bit. And then there was some cyclists to our right on the road, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, we must be getting close to the finish. I mean, you know, you know, the crowd is picking up and everything like that. And I look up, and all of a sudden, I see this big green blob. Looks like it hit him in the head and goes over his head, and I'm like, what is that? And then I thought to myself, did somebody, one of the cyclists, hit him with a balloon filled with green dye? Because that's what it looked like.
Oh,
And I'm
my.
thinking, hey, dude, hit him with a brick. You know, you know, don't mess with the balloons. Hit him with a brick.
Right.
And then I realized he's vomiting, and he's
Oh.
starting to slow down a little bit and stuff. And I'm going, I got this dude. I've got him.
Yeah.
And just as I started to accelerate and started pulling, and Coogan, I can see Coogan getting the same wheels, and I like thinking to myself, we got this dude. And all of a sudden, it was like he was shot out of a cannon. I'm like, I mean, and then I'm trying to make myself throw up. Maybe if I throw up, that'll help me. But, you know, he pulled away and just ran a fantastic race. Dick, I ended up finishing third. It was the best performance I think I've had in probably, I wouldn't say my best performance in my running career, but it was the smartest thing I've ever done, which is, you know, not simple for Keith Brantley. Like I have been known for doing some stupid stuff.
Put me in that same category there, Keith. It was so you made the Olympic team, and the thrill of that, after all the hard work, the miles and miles that you put in, and now you make the Olympic team. I mean, that's every runner's dream, is to do that, and not many people ever get that, you know, that have that opportunity to run in the Olympics.
Yeah, you know, it was also great because my entire family got to drive 5 hours to watch me run probably the greatest sporting event in the world. Yeah. They didn't have to get on a plane to go to Korea or Barcelona, and you know, so it was awesome from that fact. You know, it was a dream come true. I mean, ever since I saw, you know, Frank Shorter win silver, you know, in Montreal, that I said, that's what I want to do.
Yeah,
I want to run the Olympics. I said, I don't care, you know, about a medal. I just want to run the Olympics. And so for me, it was literally a dream come true. I know people, you know, that is a, you know, overused cliche, but it truly was. I think the only issue was that it was a little anticlimactic because in my mind, I had run in LA in the Olympics. In my mind, I had run in Seoul. In my mind, I had run in Barcelona, because when you prepare for Olympic trials, you think about the Olympic trials, but
Sure.
you're thinking about the Olympic team and you
Right.
focus in on that. So for me, it was almost like, okay, I gotta, I gotta enjoy this. And I did. It was just a wonderful experience. I wish I had run better. I mean, I think I ran about as well as Keith Brantly could have run that day. I didn't run dumb. I just didn't have a great day. I didn't have a bad day, but I
Yeah.
finished 28th overall. I think, the guy who won, Thagwani, who won, he was about maybe 6 minutes off his personal best. I was about 6 minutes off my personal
Okay.
best. So, I didn't run a terrible race. I just didn't have a great day.
Yeah. Yeah. That happened. So I gotta, I know at one time you ran for the New Balance shoe company, and I got hooked up with them, Keith, in
Oh yeah.
1979, and
Yeah.
I'm still with them 46 years later.
I know. And what's funny
There's
is
great
that,
company.
it's an incredible company. So Jim Davis signed his wife actually signed my first contract, and that was, yes, and she, that was 1989. That was just before I won the Gasparilla Distant Classic in 4250, but I will tell you this one funny story is that. So I got on the cover of Runner's World a couple of times,
Right.
and one in, I think, 1994, and then once in 95 or 92 and 94 or something like that. Anyway, when we were doing the photo shoot for the 94 cover, we were out on the beach down in Pompano Beach where I was living at the time. And I don't know if you ever run on the sand there. It's impossible to run in shoes on sand, right?
Okay.
Your foot just sinks right into it. Your shoes fill up with sand and they come off, right? And the guy was like, the colors are awesome, Keith. This is going to be the photo. I'm like, dude, I cannot wear the shoes anymore. I said, they're coming off all the time. He says, well, just take them off. We'll shoot you. We'll crop it when we'll do it from the knees up and stuff. Well, sure enough, long story short, what does it come out? He's barefooted on the cover of Runner's World.
No.
I got a call from Jim probably 30 seconds after they hit the stands. He says, "Hey, Keith, we pay you a lot of money to wear the shoes." I said, Jim, I got one thing to say. If I don't wear New Balance, I don't wear nothing at all. And he was okay with that.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great story.
What race you said, was Gasparilla, you mentioned that one. What if you said, man, if I had to boil it down, my best race, I feel like I really ran 100% smart. What was it?
Thank you. Because it's one race in my entire running career where I ran a absolutely perfect race. I executed the plan that my coach had trained me for. We were well prepared. I was going up against somebody who had beaten me to death all season long. I had beaten this guy twice just by luck. I had beaten this guy. He was sick both times, right? And this guy was a 407 miler who could run. He could close his last 400 in 55 at a 410 pace. So I mean, he owned me. But my coach said, "Hey, listen, this is my high school cross country state championships." He says, "You have one choice. You got to take this guy out to the woodshed and beat him to a pulp in the first mile." So we went out in the first mile in 4:25, and I never looked back. And I ended up running 14:16, beating Basil McGee, who was, it's still to the day he and I are close friends. He ended up running for Tennessee, and he was just a great runner, a great athlete. We went to later that year, we went to the Foot Locker Championships. He ran a fantastic race. I had a terrible day, but hey, I won the state meet, and that's all I cared about.
I want to do another little thing with you, Keith, if it's okay. I'm going to name some names, and then just let me know what comes to mind. Mark Kerp.
Oh gosh, I mean, the gentleman destroyer. I mean, he's one of these guys who nicest guy in the world, but except if you're on a road race with him, because he'll just pound you in the ground.
He was tough.
All right. How about John Sinclair?
as good a navigator sailing as he is running. And the reason why I know that is he and I we've chartered sailboats probably 4 or 5 times together, sailed to the Bahamas. We've sailed
Wow.
down to the Keys. He's an incredible, he calls me, Captain Danish, and I can't remember. I call him Navigator John. He's just an incredible person.
All right, I got one more, and be careful with this one. Rod DeHaven.
Rod DeHaven. Again, another gentleman destroyer. I mean, nicest guy in the world. His performance at the 2000 trials on that course at Pittsburgh's course on that day was really amazing. I mean, just an incredible guy. I mean, it's you look at guys like Rod, who basically he's a journeyman runner who had great performances, put it together when it needed to be put together.
Very good. Is there anybody else? I hate to leave anyone off that list because I'm just thinking I used to just love to follow race results, and it was those guys. It was you. The foreign guys, they were always there. I really wanted to pay more attention to the American runners. Just that's who I've had an interest in. What was your? I'm helping out volunteering some young kids, and keys to success. There's so many cliches, hard work, discipline, and all that. It seems like, and I'm trying to be delicate here. Your generation, when I mention those names, Rod, probably was the fastest. He ran a 2:11 marathon. You were a 2:12. I don't know what John and Mark ever did. About 2:14.
I think John was 2:13.
2:13.
John was 2:13. Yeah.
You guys,
and I think Mark was I think he was under 2:13, but I'm not completely sure.
Yeah, I think he ran 2:11 or something like that.
Did you ever feel like you guys were getting a little beat up because a lot of the European and the Kenyan East Africans were running faster? It was really unusual for an American man to run definitely sub 2:10. It would happen occasionally, but it was, and there was this kind of like, they're not working hard enough. They're not like Beardsley. They're not like Salazar. Yeah. These guys are out there just pounding the 120 to 140 miles a week. And yet, that worked for them. Help me out here. Do you feel like you guys ever got a little bit of the, I don't know, negative?
Short end of the stick.
No, I think, it was I think the things that I like about what's happening today is that the training camp model is working.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that, I invented that, but I will tell you I benefited from it, on microcycles, and I'll tell you why. There was a really good agent. He's still out there. Is Tom Ratcliffe, and Tom, worked with Kim McDonald, who worked with all the Africans. They invited me up to train with them for several summers in Boston, so I didn't have to go to Kenya and train with a group of Kenyans. And I will tell you that had one of the biggest benefits for me, especially in 1993 when I ran the Philadelphia Half Marathon, ran 61 minutes, beat all the guys I trained with that summer. Then we all got on a train and went to New York. I ended up finishing 5th at New York, probably my best finish in an international marathon. I didn't run a super fast time, but I beat all the guys I trained with. And these were 2:06, 2:08 guys.
Yeah.
I mean, Samuel Lele was a solid 2:08 guy. Godfrey Kiprotich was, a 2:10 guy. Simon Karori was a 2:08 guy. So these were all guys that were far faster than I was. But, I think, through osmosis and through confidence, I ended up doing really, really well with those guys. And, I wasn't a high mileage guy. I think the longest streak of 100 miles I had was, I think I had 10 miles of 100 miles a week. And for me, that might as well have been 1,000 miles a week, because I don't do well with high mileage. And, I think, at the end of the day, those guys gave me confidence in the workouts that we did. And so I think, it's hard to do some transference. I think, Batchelor and Shorter and Galloway and those guys, they trained in Gainesville too, together. Right. But I think now it's just, there's so many more of these professional camps. And I think that's what's really helping distance running. And obviously the super shoes are making a bit of difference.
Yeah. Comment about those. We always ask our people that we didn't have that opportunity to run in those type of shoes, and it's got to be making a little bit of a difference, at least, don't you think?
Oh, I think that makes a huge. Listen. Two comments. One is I tried the super shoes in 2018. I actually ran the Berlin Marathon, and I think I was probably about I weighed probably about 175 pounds. I was a big boy, and Kim was running it with some friends, and I thought, well, maybe I think I can do 3:45. I think if I just run a smart race, which is again, you got to be careful when you say smart race and Keith Brantly in the same phrase, but I the night before I picked up a pair of those super shoes and I just put them on. I said, I think I'm going to try the marathon. Real smart idea, right? So I put the shoes on, and the race director let me get in with the elite athletes and start with them and stuff like that. So I stayed way over to the left. And I'm thinking, I cannot go out any faster than 7:30. If I go out any faster than 7:30, I'm going to blow up. So I started out, and I the first mile 7:20. I thought, okay, I got to slow down. And I'm thinking to myself, what is this? I mean, I'm looking at my heart rate. My heart rate is about 20% lower than what it should be at that pace.
Yeah.
So I go to the next mile, it's like 7:15, 7:10, 7 minutes, 6:50. I'm thinking, and I'm not putting out any more effort than I did, in the first mile. And I'm thinking, I'm barely breathing. And I'm thinking to myself, this is cheating. this is cheating. I ended up running 3:08. And my last 2 miles, which are usually catastrophes for me, because like I said, I don't think I'd run any more than 18 miles for training for that thing. And I ended up, running through 08, and my legs felt great. So I think the shoes do have a good. I mean, they definitely help. I can't quantify what it would be today. I will just tell you this: is that it's very difficult for me to disparage the technology improvements in running shoes and tracks today, and not listen to Frank Shorter and some of the guys who ran on cinders. And I'm running on, Reckertan and Tartan and tracks, Mondo tracks with rubberized shoes. Okay. And those guys, my dad ran in 1948 in leather spikes and ran a 4:24 mile in high school.
Wow.
Okay.
Impressive.
So if that tells you where the talent is, it's from my dad, and probably from my mom too. If they were alive, they'd probably be arguing right now. But I think, at the end of the day, technology isn't just the driver of improvement. I think it does help a lot. And I think super shoes have helped a tremendous amount. They've helped the performance. I think they've allowed runners to train more and experience probably better recovery. But again, and I think we see this more in the women's running than we are seeing in the men's. I think with this new world record of 2:09:46, I think that is an incredible performance. But I think it does stand to reason that it's because your runners are able to train more. It doesn't take away from their performances. They still have to start the race. They still have to execute on tactics, and they still have to. It doesn't matter. It's just the times. The thing that I think we have to remember is that you're never going to take away my 8 national championships.
No,
you're not going to take away the things that I've done that are great in the sport. And running shoes aren't going to improve that. They're not going to make you a national champion. Okay, they'll help you run faster and put you in position to challenge that national champion. But you're not going to. It's not going to make you win. If everybody's wearing the shoes, everybody's on the equal plane.
Yeah, absolutely. So Keith, before we wind up here, gosh, we could keep going and going and going, but we're kind of starting to get a little on the wrong side here. But yeah, but that's okay. This has been wonderful. But before we leave, let's talk a little bit about your wife, Kim, because she's in her own right a heck of a runner. And I think she's run in the 2:30s for the marathon, right?
2:37, Twin Cities Marathon champion. She NCAA the D2 champion in the 5,000 and 10,000 meters. She puts up with me every day, which is, if you know me, is just an incredible feat. She is still running. Last year, she averaged 79.9 miles per week all year long, which is a fantastic feat. But when she saw that number, 79.9 miles, her head almost exploded, because she's also OCD. And if she had just run 1.2 miles longer, she would have gotten 80 miles.
Oh, and Kim is just a little bit of a gal, and she's like you. You know, when I see you guys, which isn't enough, but she's like you, always smiling, always seems to be happy, and just
Oh,
loves
come on,
to
Dick.
get out there and run.
She is so mean to me. She is so mean to me. She just the only time she's nice to me is when I shut up and I'm quiet. You know.
She was a four-time
Which I don't blame.
four-time Olympic trials qualifier. I just
Yeah, no, she's run four Olympic trials. She's
wow.
Finished seventh in the trials in 2000. Just just a fantastic runner, and she's just so tough. I mean, that I think it comes from her Midwest upbringing, but she barely escaped Vietnam before Saigon fell. She was 2 years old. Or a year old, actually. Her sister was like 4 days old. And they end up in Thorpe, Wisconsin, where most Vietnamese people end up, right?
Right. Wow.
But she's half Polish, half Vietnamese, 50-50, and just as toughest, most loving person I've ever met.
Wow, that's awesome. And Keith, again, we cannot thank you enough. And we want to thank everybody for listening today. And if you have any questions for Dunn or myself or comments about the show, you can contact us directly on our website at beardsanddunpod.com, or you can leave us a comment on our Facebook, Instagram, or X, all at Beards and Dunn Pod.
Yeah. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't be afraid to subscribe. We'd love that. And then leave us a comment there as well. And Keith, thank you so much. I ditto what Dick just said. And I think you really should try to figure out a way to get up there and go fishing with that guy. Because I tell you, we're heading out there the end of May, middle of May, and I cannot wait. Because you will catch fish, and if you're not catching fish, you're still going to have such a good time. And so I can't.
Don't you still have ice on those lakes?
Oh,
my May will be gone. My May will be gone.
We still have 30 inches of ice. I'm looking out on Lake Bemidji right now. We still got 30 inches of ice out there.
I'm in North Carolina just for that reason now, because the winters will kill you.
Well, Keith, hey, listen, thank you so much, and give our best to Kim.
Will do. Thank you.
Right, bye-bye.
Bye.